During week 4 of the college football season, that's around the time where your team, your program, starts to take shape, starts to have an identity. And we may not know who all the big dogs are by the end of this week 4 of the college football season. We might have a better gauge, but I promise you this, we will have a pretty good idea as to who the frauds are. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's College Football Show. So glad to have you here. It is a phenomenal Final Thoughts Thursday. It is Thursday, September 19th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. We got a ton to get into, as we always do. Who are the scariest teams in college football right now? And when I say scariest teams, I'm not talking about your Alabamas and your Ohio States, because like those teams were scary before the year even started. I'm talking about who are those teams now, going to be 4 weeks into the college football season, we're like, oh, hey, I don't know if we accounted for them being like that. Got a couple of teams I want to talk about there during that segment. The Textile Bowl. Yeah, Clemson-NC State. They play this weekend. No Grayson McCall for NC State, so that makes it a little bit more tricky if you're a Wolfpack fan. But we had one of you in the live chat during our Tuesday live show say, hey, please talk about Clemson. Say, we can't be the People's College Football Show and not listen to the people. So we'll give you our pick in that one. We'll break that one down as we always do on every single Thursday during the beautiful thing that is the college football season. Going to take a look at the upset watch alert. Now, we're not telling you these teams are for sure getting upset, but if there were going to be some upsets, wouldn't be the first time in college football history that happened, where would they occur? Got a handful of games to keep an eye on there. Tennessee and Oklahoma play this week. It has been one that is just an emotionally packed week for both sides of this thing. Josh Heupel's return to Norman, first big road game for Nico Iamaleava, the first game in the SEC for Oklahoma. Like, there's a lot of storylines here, but let's talk about the storylines that maybe could show themselves after the fact in this game. Because I think for both these teams, again, this game won't define them, but I do think it's sort of a fork-in-the-road moment for both Oklahoma and Tennessee. We'll unpack that one together. Got Kaiden Smith, Kado, as he's known around this office, jumping on the show a little bit later. We're going to unpack what's going on out there in the G5 party. Kaiden, a guy who is from that world, played at App State at a really high level, mind you. And so we're going to have Kaiden on here, and we'll talk some ball and unpack who could end up being the 12th seed when it comes to the college football playoff. So if you're not a big G5 guy, you're saying, hey, I'm not really tuned into action like that, don't worry, we got you. We'll get you up to speed, and then we'll have our final thoughts at the end of this thing. Gosh dang it. It fires me up so much. The fact that we're actually talking about college football and not hypotheticals and not, storylines and not things coaches are tweeting and not like, this is awesome. We actually have college football to talk about. If you're just now finding this show, welcome. Like I said, college football, nothing but college football. This is a college football show that is run by college football fans. I mean, just to put it simply, no hot takes, no clickbait, no trafficking and just trying to get traffic. Like, we respect this sport too much. We respect the people that make the sport what it is too much. So we talk about college football the way that we believe most college football fans want it talked about. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, and if you're a college football sicko that stays up till like 1 a.m. watching the games, sicko's hour as we call it on this show, this is the place for you. So make sure you're subscribed. Let's jump into this though. Who are the scariest teams in the college football landscape? And I want to give this preface at the top of this thing. This is not just like a front-runner segment. Like Texas, obviously, they're scary for everyone. Quinn Ewers, no Quinn Ewers, they're scary. They're one of the most complete teams in the country. They're number one right now for a reason. Like, yeah, Texas is scary. Ohio State, haven't played anybody. I'm not worried about that at all. They are a monster kind of operation. Could make an argument they have the best roster in college football. Even before they went out and got a Will Howard and a Quinshon Judkins and a Caleb Downs, like, they were still going to be stacked because of what they brought back on defense. So, yeah, they're scary. Ole Miss, again, I don't care they haven't played anybody. They haven't allowed a touchdown. I do not care who the other opponent is. You don't allow a touchdown, you're doing something right. Jackson Dart hasn't thrown for less than 370 yards a game just yet. So, yeah, they're rolling right now. So I give that preface and then give you one of the ultimate front runners, and I'll tell you why I think they're scary. I think Georgia is extra scary because they already got their smelling salt moment out of the way in week 3. And you give a Georgia team kind of a jolt back to life and show them their mortality like you had them, honestly, a game where you probably could have, would have, should have won that if you're Kentucky. That's scary because Georgia, whenever they have that smelling salt moment, last year it was the game at Auburn. A couple years before, it was the Missouri game. Whenever they have that moment now, they sort of recollect themselves and start playing a lot closer to their potential of the roster. It feels like every single year we have this question of, well, hey, is Georgia who we thought they are? Are they who we think they were before the season started? And then Georgia goes out and goes on a run. So the fact that Georgia already had that moment out of the way and won the ball game, and oh, by the way, they get a couple mulligans now in the 12-team playoff. Georgia, I think for those reasons, outside of just being really freaking good, they're one of the scariest teams in college football. Now, Miami is terrifying for the rest of the college football landscape for two main reasons. One, they have a Cristobal-level roster on the lines of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively. We've said it many times. As a head coach, you cannot change where you're from. I'm not talking about geography. I'm talking, and though Mario Cristobal is from Miami, so that doesn't hurt things, I'm talking about where you played at. Like Mario Cristobal was an offensive lineman. The line of scrimmage is near and dear to his heart. So it has been a priority since getting to Coral Gables to have that up to par. Now with guys like Francis Mauanoa, Ruben Bain, they're a lot closer to that, and they're playing like it in year 3 under Cristobal. And then arguably the differentiating factor here is they have a complete psychopath at quarterback in Cam Ward. And I say that in the most affectionate way possible. I actually Googled, hey, what actually is a psychopath? I don't want to just throw this term out there willy-nilly. The definition that I found was extreme lack of empathy. You watch Cam Ward, that first game of the year. I know they haven't played anybody since. I don't care that they did numbers against Ball State and Florida A&M. Like, I'm not worried about those games. Talk about the game against Florida. He walked into the swamp and took that thing over. And again, I keep saying this just had such a cold-blooded approach to it. He's like walking out of bounds. Like, that's very, very different. There's a different level of swag than we've seen at the U for a while now. But the thing is, we've seen it before. We've seen that competitive edge. We've seen that we're the boss kind of approach from them before. That was back in like early 2000s in the 80s. I'm not saying the U is back because we're not really into the whole we're back culture, but I do think Miami is terrifying for the rest of college football, and Cam Ward is a massive reason why because of how he has that team operating. Now here's kind of a sleeper scary team, if you will. I think Nebraska is really scary. If you want to push back on that, that's fine. But the reason why I think they're scary is because we don't even know who they are just yet. And I'm not sitting here telling you Nebraska's going to win the Big Ten. I'm not telling you they're making the college football playoff. I think both those things are probably a year away, maybe 2 years away. But like the fact that we don't know what they are, and more importantly, the fact that Nebraska apparently is no longer beating themselves. I mean, knock on wood, you haven't thrown an interception just yet if you're Jalen Raiola. Knock on wood, you're averaging half a turnover a game, which is good for top 15 in America. We always said this. If Nebraska would stop beating themselves and giving the ball away like it was Halloween on trick-or-treating, like just you get a turnover, you get a turnover, you get a turnover, knock on the door, you get a turnover. If they would stop doing that, Nebraska has a chance. Okay? Like you try to piece back together your season if you're a Nebraska fan from a year ago, and you're like, hey, 5-1 score games. If we don't give the football away, maybe we're a 10-win team. And it sounds sort of ridiculous when you say it before the next season because you're like, yeah, okay, good luck with that. But Nebraska right now is doing what they were asked to do a year ago going into this year. And Dylan Raiola, obviously, I think his ceiling or the lack thereof is what makes them even more terrifying as the year goes on. So not calling my shot for Nebraska to be the team that comes out of the Big Ten or telling you to make the playoff, but I am saying Nebraska, with all that they have in-house now and that maturity they've shown and not beating themselves, they're going to be a very difficult out. Very, very difficult out. They play teams like Ohio State, play teams like USC. They may very well be one of those teams that sort of ruins one of the other teams' chances to make the college football playoff. Speaking of teams that have done what we've asked them to do, the what if around USC was always, well, what if they get a defense? What if they start playing a better, more physical brand of football over there? It looks like that what if is turning into a they do. Small sample size. I don't want to crown them after just 2 games because they haven't played since the Utah State game they want to buy last week. But, like, we see a temperature change. We see more violence get into the football. We see better tackling. We see Lincoln Riley apparently has another quarterback in Miller Moss who can sling the ball around the yard. So right now I'm seeing in a very, very early part of the year, USC, if they have that defense that ends up being maybe not elite, but good enough, USC is going to be terrifying. They're going to be very, very tough to beat, and I think they're definitely going to be in that college football playoff conversation this week against Michigan. We'll talk more about this later, but this week against Michigan is going to be a very good litmus test for us, I believe, on how far along that Trojan defense is, especially on the physicality side on the defensive line. Now, Tennessee, they may be the scariest team on this list. Georgia probably being excluded from that conversation, but we know what Georgia is. The thing that's terrifying to me is they now have a defensive line, not just that first level or that first unit, but like the twos as well. They have real depth on the defensive line that I think can go toe-to-toe with the Georgias of the world, the Alabamas of the world, whoever else they end up seeing in the college football playoff. And that was sort of always the thing if you were a Tennessee fan you were trying to account for. Like you talk about Josh Heupel's offense and you talk about how many points you're going to score and you say, well, if we score enough points, we kind of minimize how much the trench play actually matters for those other teams. Well, now you're at this point where you got a generational player at quarterback, I believe, in Nico Iamaleava. He keeps trending the way that he trends. This offense looks a lot like it did in 2022. But then you pair that defense up front with it. Like, I don't think you have to squint that hard to see Tennessee in Atlanta playing for the SEC title. And I understand this game this weekend's a massive part of that. But, like, if Tennessee splits the Georgia and Alabama games, I mean, one, you'd be throwing a party in Knoxville. That's first of all. Second of all, I don't know who else you're losing to. Knock on wood, like, again, I don't think it's quite the stretch that maybe we anticipated it could be before the year at SEC Media Days for Tennessee, not just to make the playoff, but to be right in the mix to win the darn conference, right? And I feel pretty good about saying that. Now, one more team that I think is scary right now is Kansas State. And the Big 12, man, they don't get enough love, and when they do get love, it's towards Utah and Oklahoma State. They got a big game this weekend. They got a salty defense, does Kansas State, bringing back 80% production from last year's unit that only allowed 17 points a game. But the key factor for me when I talk about Kansas State being dangerous, Avery Johnson, I know it's his first year out there. I understand that. There might be some growing pains still, but, like, if you watch that game last Friday night against Arizona, that is a dude now in number 2 who any Saturday, he could just put on the cape and say, hey, you know what? Yes, you have this matchup that favors y'all. You have this on defense that favors y'all. On paper, y'all should win this game. But guess what? Throw on the red cape, pulls back the number 2. It's the S under the jersey. Like, he could just be Superman and change the game for Kansas State. I think he's that good running the football. And that obviously puts defenses in a bind with defending the pass as well, because if you commit too much to Avery Johnson, there's some room on the back end. Like, Kansas State now, over the course of the last 3 weeks, I've become a lot more of a believer in what they're doing out there in Manhattan. So some scary teams across the country now. Not a front-runner segment, but some teams now that I think we got to keep an eye on as this year progresses that I believe will absolutely factor into this college football playoff discussion. It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a fun year, especially get to that 12-team playoff now. 12-team playoff is going to be a movie. I'll say that right now. If you're watching live, make sure you're subscribed. If you're listening on podcast, we appreciate y'all for that. Wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, however, listening at work, listening while you're studying for your finals or prelims for our folks out there in the Northeast. Appreciate you being dialed in. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed as well, and we'll keep a good thing going here. So we jump into week 4. And it's always the question, man, where are the upsets? Where could they happen? This is kind of like a weather forecast. We're not trying to tell you exactly like, hey, they are beating them. We do that during the week, during our prediction show, and if we feel strongly enough about an upset, we'll put it on the docket there. But there's, I think, probably 4 games that I'm watching most closely that have some real upset potential, sort of that shark fin in the water, if you will, which is, I think, the best part about this whole segment is we get to use that lower third with the shark fin in the water. Shouts out to Nick Brake. James Madison in North Carolina, maybe not the most appealing logo game, but JMU, they're 2-0. I don't think they're a walkover by any stretch of the imagination. UNC is a 10.5-point favorite at the crib. North Carolina now potentially could be doing a little peek over the old JMU logo. They see their game at Duke, rivalry game. I know it's not basketball, but still, that game matters to them. I'm not 100% sure exactly what you'll get at quarterback for North Carolina, but I do think James Madison could be a tough out in this one. Not calling my shot, but I do think that could be a tough out. Now, this is the one that, for us being in Nashville, is the most intriguing as we sit here right now. Vanderbilt going to Columbia, Missouri. The spread is 20.5, favoring Mizzou. Now, if you kept tabs on Mizzou last week and you just checked the box score, you say, oh, good, Missouri, they beat Boston College, more or less handled them. But there was a point now where Missouri, they had to fight and scratch and claw and turn it back on to be able to surge past Boston College. Like, Missouri didn't exactly look like the epitome of the creme de la creme of the SEC. Vanderbilt got a quarterback out there who's must-see TV. Nashville, Johnny Manziel, Diego Pavia, transferring in from New Mexico State. Got some shake and bake to him. We say this a lot with mobile quarterbacks. They're game plan breakers. So you might have the right defense drawn up. You might have exactly the right coverage, but like when the play breaks down and two takes off running out the back door, did you account for that? Do you have the right play design to then be able to calibrate for that kind of it factor at quarterback? I'm just saying now, 20.5, I'll say this, feels disrespectful. You will see that number on our gambling content on my Instagram page at JD Piquel, the segment we do there against the suits. Vandy plus 20.5, lock that in. Vandy outright, we'll see, but keep an eye on that one. Now, Miami, they go to USF. I say to USF. They'll take the however many, maybe they'll fly, I don't know. Not a long trip, rather, for Miami to play South Florida. Miami favored by 16.5. Beware of the home dog. Home dogs tend to bite now. I'm just saying. Miami, too. I know they look great against Florida, and I just told you I think they're one of the scariest teams in college football. But they haven't really stretched the legs too much since they got to play Florida. Like, that was a big moment, big game, and then after that you play Florida A&M. You play Ball State. USF, the Fighting Alex Golishes, they believe that they are able to compete with anybody in America. They took Alabama to that fourth quarter in Tuscaloosa. This one is at the crib if you're USF, and I'm just saying now, keep an eye on this one. Keep a very close eye on this one. I would still pick Miami to win this game. I don't know if I feel amazing about them covering, just by nature of what USF has been. Also, I'll say this about the Alabama game for USF. Think about the confidence that builds for them. I understand the final score was the final score, but for it to be a one-point game in the fourth quarter, you look in the mirror a little bit if you're USF and say, okay, hey, we can hang. Now, Alabama was dinged up, I get that, but I think the confidence for USF could be a major factor in the fact that they host Miami. One more for you here. Akron at South Carolina. Full transparency, Akron's not great. All right, they're 1-2, losses to Ohio State and Rutgers, so it is what it is. But South Carolina, favored by 27.5. Lenoris Sellers, from what I am understanding, he might be a game-time decision. If he can't go, this offense has substantially less juice with Robbie Ashford. No knock on Robbie Ashford. We saw what we saw against LSU. Now, Akron's not going to be LSU, but I think that does make things a little bit more interesting. You pair that with the fact that South Carolina, man, just the emotional drain that last week's game against LSU was. College game days there, and you're up 17, and you are blaming the officials. Like, there's a lot that goes into that one. Are you able to pick yourself up off the map emotionally and go play in a game where you see the logo and you're like, man, we got Akron, like, doesn't exactly stimulate the senses as much as another SEC logo would. So keep an eye now. I know it's 27.5, but that could be one situationally that make things just a little bit more intriguing than they would have been. So keep an eye on that. That's the upset watch for week 4. I love that lower third so much. That lower third is probably my favorite lower third we have throughout the week here. So we got a massive one in Norman, Oklahoma. The Hype Bowl, the Heupel Bowl, whatever you want to call it. Josh Heupel's return to Norman, Oklahoma. The emotions around this one speak for themselves. Like Tennessee, obviously, they're trying to charge towards a college football playoff berth, and this is a massive game for Oklahoma, their first game in the SEC. But I think what's interesting here, not so much the storylines going into it, even though those are massively impactful, and we've talked about those ad nauseum. I think the storylines we could have after this game is what really is intriguing. Because for Tennessee now, this is kind of your launch pad game, right? Like, I've talked to some folks here in Nashville that are Tennessee fans, and they've kind of all said the same thing. This is the game now where we find out how good we actually are. Like Chattanooga, Kent State, great. NC State, thought would pack a little more of a punch, and it didn't. But a win against Oklahoma on the road, prime time, college game day, all those things. Yes, there's momentum, but I think the confidence and ultimately like the identity-claiming win this could be for the Vols is massive. Because in this way, if you beat Oklahoma and do them, in the sense that you hope to do it, if you're able to win by more than a touchdown, which the spread is right now in Vegas, think about how you view every other game that's not Bama or Georgia. Like, every other game looks very much so winnable. You host Kentucky, and that's the only game on the schedule that I'm like, oh, that looks like a little bit more of an interesting game. You feel pretty good about where you're standing if you're Tennessee. You feel like, okay, the playoff is attainable. Playoff is very, very attainable. Now, on the flip side, if you were to lose this game, there would be sort of this gut punch feel. And I think to go with that, there would be very much so like a missed opportunity feel. Like Coach 30 is just hysterical on social media. He has a phrase he'll use a lot in his videos, which are satirical in nature, breaking down film of previous, I think it's college football for the most part, but also some NFL games, I think maybe. Moment too big, can't handle the moment. That would be the feeling if you're Tennessee. Whether it's actually true or not, because you look at the roster and like, okay, in theory, I think we're further along than Oklahoma. We feel good about where our quarterback's at. We feel good about the advantage we have on the defensive line versus their offensive line. This really is favoring us, not just on the scoreboard, or the spread rather, but this is favoring us on paper as well. And so if we can't get it done here, like kind of the inverse of what we just mentioned, I think you start to look at that college football playoff path and you're really chasing 10-2. Because Georgia and Bama, not saying you can't win those, but those are going to be difficult tasks, so it's going to be a steep climb. And then also I think you probably, at least as the college football public, you sort of start to produce these questions around Tennessee and say, okay, well, how good are they actually? Because they were supposed to win that game. They didn't in Norman. Who did they beat? Well, they beat Chattanooga. They beat Kent State. They beat NC State. And NC State doesn't really look all that good at this point in the year. Would make those first three games feel a little bit hollow. Not insignificant, but it would feel a little bit hollow, and I think we'd be questioning, okay, well, who really is Tennessee? Not saying that they're fraudulent, not saying they're not any good, but I do think you start to say, okay, interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, for Oklahoma, this is an opportunity for them to make a statement, their first game in the SEC. And we said it during our game prediction. I'll say it again. You get one first impression. You get one. Like shaking your significant other father's hand. You don't want to go in there floppy fish. You don't want to grab too early and grab the fingers. It's awkward. Like you get one first handshake when it comes to meeting the SEC. And like I said, a chance now for Oklahoma really to send a message. And it's only week 4, so again, I don't think you plant your flag as like we're going to be the bully of the SEC in this game. But I do think you're able to send the message of like, hey, we're about to be a pain for y'all. We were a touchdown underdog. They came to our place. We're breaking in a new offensive line. Got a new quarterback. Yeah, we've been dinged up throughout the course of this year, but like we're about to be a pain for y'all. Brent Venables, I'm sure, will apply some pressure. And if Oklahoma wins this game, like I think we start to recalibrate how we view them in terms of the pecking order in the SEC. Like you look ahead to that game at Auburn, and they got a big one this week against Arkansas. We'll talk about a little bit later in this show as well. But like what it would say about the offense to me is really what I would be honing in on this game. Because the offense for Tennessee really should be scoring points. As good as the Oklahoma defense is, I expect Tennessee to score some points. So if Oklahoma is able to get it done now, again, with a brand new offensive line, I think you start to give a lot of credit to Seth Littrell. And I think if Oklahoma wins this game, it would be behind the performance of a very, very gritty showing from Jackson Arnold. Like I think I would leave this game saying, hey, Jackson Arnold now, he's not just a cog in the machine. Like he can be the difference for you in games where maybe you don't have the advantage up front. Maybe you don't have the advantage on different parts of the matchup, calculator. He can be one of those guys that just breaks the matchup calculator. That could be what you say if Jackson Arnold elevates this team to a win Saturday night. Now, if there's a loss, I think the question around the loss would be, okay, we were a touchdown dog. It is what it is. The eye test plays a massive factor here. Is it a touchdown loss? Is it they lose by 2 touchdowns? Is it a 3-point loss? Like that matters for sure. But the question that I think we'd start asking is, okay, well, where's the floor for Oklahoma? Because you lost to Tennessee. No one's faulting you for that, but then you got to go to Auburn the next week, pick yourself back up, and you got a couple other games on the schedule. You're like, okay, is Oklahoma better than them? Are they able to, kind of swing momentum back in their direction and find a way to get it done and beat a South Carolina? Are they better than a LSU? Like, we start to wonder where this Oklahoma team falls among the SEC pecking order. And then I think you also look at the games that they've played already. You say, okay, well, that Houston game where they kind of sleptwalk a little bit, and we sort of gave them I don't want to say a pass, but we sort of viewed them as, okay, they're still trying to calibrate. They're still finding their footing. We viewed that as more of a fluky game, I think, for Oklahoma. If you lose to Tennessee, and it's convincing for Tennessee in terms of like a decisive win on the scoreboard, I think you say, okay, well, shoot, like maybe that was Oklahoma we saw struggle with Tulane, that we saw struggle with Houston. So however you slice it, both for Tennessee and for Oklahoma, to me this is a fork-in-the-road game, and maybe even a better way to put it is like this is a table-setting game for both. For Tennessee, again, I said it, you can't drop this game and feel good about your college football playoff aspirations. That path becomes much more steep. If you're Oklahoma, you can't lose this game and then claim to be a top third team in the SEC. So just so we're on the same page, I think both long-term are in a good spot. I mean, past this season, I was very much so pro giving Brent Venables a new contract. I think that was phenomenal. For Tennessee, Josh Heupel, if you can't win this game, we're not throwing in the white towel. It's a long season, but I'm just saying now, keep an eye on the optics around both teams because the storylines will start to shift very drastically from this one game, and the path for both of these teams going forward will start to shift very drastically from this game that happens Saturday night in Norman. Gonna be a fun one, man. I can't wait. I keep saying I can't wait, but I genuinely cannot wait for that one. That's the one we've had circled here for a while. Should be a lot of fun. All right, let's get to a game prediction that y'all actually asked for. So we're doing the live show. Looked at the live chat, and one of y'all said, "Hey, can you please talk about Clemson?" Like, yeah. We are the people's show. They got a game this week that we think has some teeth to it, has some impact to it. The Textile Bowl. You got NC State at Clemson, 12 Eastern, ABC in Death Valley, mind you. Clemson's a 20.5-point favorite. I'll say this. We got a chance to go out to Clemson last year for the Florida State game. Noon kick, early in the year, and it was one of those games where I wasn't 100% sure what to expect from the atmosphere at Clemson because even walking into the stadium, you had the people at Clemson, which were so nice, by the way, saying, hey, come back for a night game. The night game here is crazy. Like almost it sounded like to me trying to compensate for what the atmosphere was going to be like for Clemson. And then we end up watching the game. We end up getting to be down there on the field for like the fourth quarter and overtime. And like that place was on fire. So I expect it to be no different with NC State coming to town. Noon kick, doesn't matter. Place will be rocking. Clemson, again, a 20.5-point favorite. For Clemson in this game, I think they are trying to still like reset the opinion of themselves from the Georgia game. Because we all saw the Georgia game, and I think a lot of people were very quick to say, oh, well, Dabo's got to use the portal if they want to win games like that. Oh, Dabo and Clemson, have they fallen off? And it's like, y'all, it's Georgia's best team in college football right now. Like, let's all take a beat here. So if they're able to convincingly win a game like this, I think they could reset that public opinion from the college football public, that is, in terms of how we view them. Now for NC State, it's been a bit of been a rocky start. The Tennessee game obviously leaves a bad taste in your mouth if you're a Wolfpack fan. And you add insult to injury, or injury to insult, I suppose, more in a literal sense. No Grayson McCall in this game. Transfer quarterback from Coastal Carolina is not going to be the guy for you. Instead, it'll be true freshman from the state of Florida, C.J. Bailey, playing quarterback for you. Also is Jeremiah Smith's quarterback, do-it-all wide receiver right now at Ohio State, who's also a freshman. So kind of breaking him in, allowing him to kind of get his footing. It's going to be massive. So we'll keep an eye on this one, keep an eye on that storyline of how they help C.J. Bailey. But to me, the story in this one really is Clemson and their offense. And we've been talking about Clemson's offense for a while now. Y'all, you go back and watch that App State game. It was an offensive clinic from Clemson. I mean, passing out T-shirts and juice boxes afterwards just because of how they, like I said, ran essentially a clinic camp for App State that day. But to me, watching that game back, it wasn't just the points. Like it scored, I think, over 50 in the first half, which is a record-setting day for Clemson. But to me, it was more so like the way they did it. It was explosive. It was run to pass. It was window dressing. It was vertical shots. It was also Bryant Wesco now and TJ Moore eating greedy. Bryant Wesco had a 76-yarder in that one. Cade Klubnik had a 16 yards per completion kind of afternoon, okay? That's what we've been missing from Clemson. Now, I understand. It wasn't, Georgia on the other side that day, but if they can kind of build off of that, create some momentum, and be that explosive offense, not only will they roll in this game, they're going to be right back in the mix of it for, a college football playoff, not just berth, but bye. They could win the ACC if that's the case. And I think if you're Clemson too, you're watching the NC State Tennessee tape a little bit, and I think if you're Garrett Riley, man, you are licking your chops Because what Tennessee did so effectively in that football game, they ran the ball well, had the quarterback run working, and then they also were able to punish them deep. Set up the pass with the run. Something that I'd love to see Garrett Riley do in this game. That defense from NC State now, they have shown they will overcommit. Is that the case in this game? We'll see. Now, it doesn't take, any courage to pick Clemson outright. It's a 20.5-point spread for a reason. But how would NC State go about winning this football game if they were to do it? One, we talk about, what's going on with Clemson and what went wrong for Clemson the next day. But for NC State, I think defensively, what we just said about Clemson, their path to victory, the explosive plays and Cade Klubnik getting comfortable and running and passing, that's fine if you want to run the football. We just have to limit the explosive plays, which is simplistic. I promise you every single defensive coordinator in America is saying that going into every single game week. I get that. But it really, I really would be curious, is Clemson able to play a boring style of football and beat NC State? Because, yeah, NC State, they're not the defense they have been over the course of the last few years under Dave Doeren. But for this game now, Dave Doeren's going to have them dialed in. All right, they will be ready to play for this one. There'll be an extra couple degrees of temperature for that defense, getting after Cade Klubnik. So, also worth noting, they're averaging 2 takeaways a game is NC State. Got to steal one here for your freshman quarterback. Because it might be a little bit of let's get him going, get him some momentum, get him comfortable. It might be some of that. I'm just saying now, if you can get a couple extra possessions, that would, I think, do wonders for momentum, obviously, and would do wonders for giving your offense and your freshman quarterback a chance. And when I was putting the segment together, man, I was thinking like, okay, well, support your freshman quarterback, run the football. And that's all true. But, like, if you want to walk into Death Valley and beat Clemson, CJ Bailey, I know you're a freshman, brother. We got to connect on some haymakers here, all right? We got to be able to make that Clemson defense pay when they try to overcommit to the run or bring some extra pressure. Because we saw Georgia do that at a high level. Now, Georgia's Georgia, and Carson Beck, I think, is arguably the best quarterback in college football. So I'm not asking you to be Carson Beck, but I do believe that Clemson, they're going to be aggressive. When they are aggressive, can you stand in there, know what you're looking at, and get the ball to your playmakers? Kevin Concepcion is one of the best playmakers in the ACC that I feel like nationally doesn't get enough love. He's averaging 9 yards a catch. You got to get him involved. Got to get him, whether it's speed sweep, the pop pass, whatever you want to do. He has to see the football if you want a chance to beat Clemson. So that's the path for him here. But I think, like, at the end of the day, this spread is what it is for a reason. The defense is tough. Defense is tough if you're NC State's offense trying to figure out a way against Clemson. They're going to put a lot of pressure on this quarterback, the true freshman. It's going to be a raucous environment. Georgia popped in the second half against Clemson being able to run the football and kind of be able to adapt their game plan. And that's awesome, but no knock on NC State. They're not Georgia. They're not Georgia. So I don't expect them to have that push up front that the Dogs had against Clemson. I think Clemson's able to take care of business. Prize picks, we love to play prize picks around here. There's a play I like in this game. There's a square I like. Antonio Williams, his receiving yard total is set at 46.5. I'm going to take the less there. I'm going to take the less there because I think the offense will be potluck style. It'll be some Bryant Wesco. It'll be some TJ Moore. It'll be Briggins. Like, it's going to be mixing it up a little bit. So give me the less on Antonio Williams and his receiving total, and then go ahead and match that with the Caleb Williams free square and enjoy your winnings. I'm going to go ahead and project that. I think Clemson wins. I think Clemson covers. If Grayson McCall was playing, I might feel differently, but I think Clemson wins and covers in the Valley. And the narrative around Clemson now could be shifting a little bit more towards we might have sold that Clemson stock a little bit too quickly after the Georgia game. Not us, but I think the college football public might be feeling that way just a little bit. So it'll be a fun one, man. Again, let us know what you want us to break down. We'll do it on this show, the People's College Football Show. We appreciate you for that. Now, being the People's College Football Show, man, we talk about the entire sport, from the SEC to the Big Ten, and y'all, you know what? We're gonna talk some G5 right now with the man Kaiden Smith, known as Cato around this office, G5 specialist, jumping on here to make us all just a little bit wiser when it comes to the G. Dude, you're looking fresh right now. You got the vest. You walked in. I mean, you can't see. He's got those panda dunks. You got some. Is that what they are?
They're navy blue.
Navy. Okay. The navy panda dunks, man. You and I were talking about this, dude. I think we slept on the Mac. What's the latest that you're seeing from them in terms of teams that could maybe find themselves in that 12 seed spot and find themselves in the dance?
Yeah, when we talk about the MAC, JD, you have they're the only team that's ranked in the group of 5 right now at that 23 spot. So when you talk about pole position as far as the group of 5 team making it to that 12 seed, making it to the college football playoff, it's really just all about, is this going to be the team that can hold on to pole position going out through the rest of the season? Because you talk about them, they have a rare opportunity coming up here in 2 weeks playing an NC State team who didn't necessarily live up to the expectations this year. So they have a great opportunity to boost up their resume and become a team that is now going into this with that's going into this situation with a high upside as far as the rest of their schedule and how that's looking. So you talk about going through this MAC schedule. They still have to play Miami of Ohio. They have to play a Toledo team that we're going to talk about here shortly, who's also undefeated right now. So it's going to be about, can they make it through this schedule? This is a 7-6 team last year who is now looking much better, much more improved. They brought back 16 starters, probably the most confident team in this group that we're going to talk about here. So really excited for them. They kind of control their own destiny. I think if they run the table here with them being ranked and kind of making that early impact in this season, you can expect some big things out of this NIU team who's looking really confident right now.
Dude, you mentioned the Rockets, because you and I, we will kind of pass each other in the office, and we'll just trade pleasantries, and we'll talk about, I'll always mention the shoes, but then we'll have little moments where we talk about the G5, and it's hey, the Rockets beat Mississippi State. Now, is Mississippi State any good? Probably not. But even with that being said, you look at the resume, it's hey, that's a SEC win right there. Is Toledo, I know the MAC is going to be brutal, is Toledo maybe looking like one of those teams that, are they the front runner in the MAC is a better question. What do you think about Toledo right now?
Yeah, I'm glad we can give them their flowers here, JD, because we obviously did not talk about the MAC at all going into this preview. And this Toledo team now is looking like by far the most explosive offense in the MAC. This is a conference that's known for their defense, it's known for running the ball. Last year they led the conference in rushing and passing per game and points per game by far. And it looks like they're they're picking up right where they left off last year. Daquan Finn was their quarterback. He transferred to Baylor, but they have a guy coming in now in Tucker Gleason who's looking fantastic this year, has 9 touchdowns, which is tied for 3rd in the nation with some guys like Shador Sanders, if you've heard of him. So he's playing fantastic this year. He's balling out. But again, it's all about, can he make it through this schedule? When you look at this Toledo team, they have to play Miami of Ohio in a couple weeks. They have to play NIU. And I keep bringing up Miami of Ohio because this conference does still run through Miami of Ohio. They're the most tenured coach in the conference. They won the title last year, but they lost their first 2 games of the season against a Power 4 opponent. But they still have all of their aspirations as far as wanting to win this conference title yet again. You have an Ohio team that played excellent against a Power 4 opponent. You have Bowling Green, who played tough against Penn State early in the season. So it's going to be hard to make it through the MAC. It's going to be a gauntlet, but these 2 teams have now put themselves in a position where if they run the table, especially NIU already being ranked and having that big win against Notre Dame, to where they're in a nice spot for sure in the MAC.
So I'm kind of throwing you a curveball here because we're going through, just different things throughout this segment, and I know I have it all in front of me, and you and I talked about it before, so I didn't say I was going to ask this, but when it comes to the MAC, we do our playoff tiers every single week. And I have the G5 party is what I call it. And I haven't put NIU in there yet just because of what you just alluded to a second ago. The MAC is going to be, to me, it feels like the Hunger Games a little bit. It's going to be, this team is on top. No, this team is on top. And we might see a champion here who's sitting there with 2 losses. And you're well, are they better than call it a 1-loss Boise State or a 1-loss UNLV if it ends up, breaking that way? Yeah, what does the MAC need to get in the playoff here, Kaiden?
For sure, yeah. It's definitely going to be hard for the MAC to garner respect compared to some of these other conferences who've kind of regularly seen themselves in that Cotton Bowl discussion. But I think NIU getting off to a hot start and getting the statement upset win to start the season is going to be huge for them, and that's the reason why they're ranked. We're going to talk about some other teams here who are undefeated, but they're not ranked because they didn't beat Notre Dame on that big stage and didn't kind of grasp that national attention. We've talked in the past about how storylines are going to be a big part of this, and I think NIU is kind of that missing or key puzzle piece, rather, to the MAC having the respect nationally. It's a tough conference. There was 5 teams in this league that held teams under 21 points per game, so the defenses are stout. It's just about, can maybe on a national spotlight. I know this Miami of Ohio game coming up in a couple weeks is going to be on a Tuesday night. Maybe if the MAC can show out on a national stage when they're the only show in town on television, and NIU can maybe keep their momentum and kind of bring up the rest of the conference, I think that's their best shot as far as getting that respect compared to other Group of 5 leagues.
Kaiden, I've never done drugs, but I will say this. It has to be the closest thing to canceling your Wednesday night plans and saying, no, you know what, I can't. Maction's on tonight. We're going to learn a lot about the college football playoff landscape when it comes to, tuning into Wednesdays for your average college football fan is going to be if it wasn't already a requirement for you, it's going to have to shape your week now going forward, man. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's talk about the funeral that happened this past weekend. Memphis just put Florida State in the casket, buried them. Sorry for the folks in Tallahassee watching this show. It's nothing personal. It's just American Athletic Conference football from Memphis. 3-0. again, it's kind of the same thing we said about Toledo. Like, we don't know what Florida State's going to be. I mean, right now it doesn't look like Florida State's going to – I mean, they're going to fight to make a bowl game, so we'll see how that win ages. Give me your thoughts on Memphis here. Are you buying or selling Memphis maybe being that team that finds their way into the college football playoff?
Yeah, if Memphis was a stock, JD, I'm buying a ton of them. I was very high on them coming into the season, and the thing that scared me the most about them was their schedule, which is still a concern that we can talk about. But the reason why I like them so much is because of the makeup of their roster and the build of their team. And I think the fact that they went into Florida State, played not their best game, and were still able to leave with a win there just shows and kind of proves why I was so high on them. Seth Hennigan's their star quarterback. He didn't even play a great game in this matchup. He had a very pedestrian performance, but did what he had to do for this team to win games. And it's kind of that any given Saturday kind of team where if you look at their personnel, a lot of transfers, a lot of size up front on both sides of the ball, a lot of playmakers. They will be able to be in a dogfight and win every game they play in this year. It's about can they now make it through their gauntlet of a schedule when you look at the American Conference. They have to go to USF. They have to go to UTSA, which maybe is taking a step back. My Frank Harris theory about him kind of propping up Jeff Traylor is looking a little bit nice early in the season, but they also have to go to a Tulane team to end the season who's played great football against Oklahoma and Kansas State. So this team is absolutely built for that 12-team playoff. I'm selfishly kind of rooting for them because I think they might give us the best matchup when it's all said and done if you get there. The question is going to be, can they make it through this gauntlet? And I think if they do make it through this gauntlet, JD, I think I can kind of proudly and confidently say they deserve to be in that spot. If they can beat a Florida State team who maybe didn't live up to their expectations, but they did their job, but if they can also go through this conference and really go undefeated and run the table, which hasn't happened in a while, I think if you look at the AAC, I think Memphis is definitely a team to look out for.
And it's funny because with the G5, it feels like we talk about eye test for every other facet of the playoff. Like the eye test was a big thing with Florida State last year with Noah Jordan Travis, and the eye test around Alabama. And like, well, hey, does Georgia have a case? Because they lost the SEC, but the eye test now, they passed that. Do we maybe like dismiss that with the G5? I feel like maybe there's a little bit of like glance at the records. Okay, Liberty looks the best on paper. We're going to roll with them as the G5 rep. Or like, do you think we're going to see a lot more, I don't want to say seriousness taken when it comes to assessing the G5? But like, do you think we'll maybe lock in a little bit more for like using the eye test for these G5 teams?
I definitely think it's worth doing, JD, and I think we talked about it in the last episode when we talked to Group of 5 football. Florida State kind of set the precedent, I think, for the playoff and the 4-team with being an undefeated team and not making it. I think there's definitely a universe, and this might be the universe we live in, where a non-undefeated team might be able to make it in here. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it shakes out throughout the season. But I think when you're a committee and you're trying to put the best games possible and you want to avoid those blowouts in this playoff, you want to get the best game you can as a committee and as just a college football body, you have to take the eye test into account. It's going to be fascinating to see how they kind of judge these close losses to Power 4 teams. How good is this Power 4 team? How confident are you in this conference being one where if you go undefeated in it, it's a good resume builder for yourself? So I think the committees should hopefully take their time. If they want another member of their committee to specifically look at Group of 5 ball and give them their suggestions, I'm here for them. But I think it's going to be fascinating to see how the committee at the end of the year makes their decision, because it looks like we're going to have maybe an undefeated team, maybe a 1-loss, a 2-loss team, and how they stack up against each other is going to be very fascinating.
PSA, selection committee, if you're watching right now, get Cato in there, all right? Get my guy on the committee, and we'll make sure that you don't have to stay up too late or cancel your Wednesday plans. Like, Cato's got you covered. UNLV, dude, they're a wagon. 3-0, and 2 of those wins being against Power 4 teams, against Houston and Kansas. Like, the go-go chain, too, is nice. I don't know if you saw that. I think it was Brendan Marion who was rocking it. Yep. The go-go off. Like, UNLV looks like the team to beat right now when it comes to this whole G5 discussion. I know they're going to have to play Boise State. They get Boise State at home, I believe, so that'll be huge. Thoughts on UNLV right now? Are we believing the hype right now? It's only week 4, but are we believing the hype in UNLV?
Yeah, JD, Coach Marion's offense is shining. That chain is shining. They're looking really good. And I think if you look at all the teams in the Group of 5, they have the best resume out of anyone. They beat a Power 4 team week 1 of the season, going to Houston, getting a win there. They go and get a win against Kansas on the road there as well. And they have the rare opportunity in 2 weeks to get another win against a P4, playing a Syracuse team where if you look at Kyle McCord and that offense, that's an explosive team. Not many quarterbacks are playing better than that guy right now. They also play Fresno State, which could be another electric game. So I think you look at this go-go offense. If you haven't watched UNLV, definitely tune in and watch them. This is a style of offense that's really fun to watch. They'll get 2 backs back there and run some power run, but also get some deep shots and some vertical passing game. They're trying to make sure they take advantage of the tempo. They try to create what's called a 5th quarter from just getting enough plays by running so many plays so often. They have a dual threat quarterback that's extremely fun to watch right now in Matthew Sluka, who's a Holy Cross transfer who was there for the last 4 years. So they're a fun team to watch. They're looking good. They have a great defense as well. They're playing well on the back end and up front. And I think when you look at a roadmap to make it to the college football playoff, if this team runs the table, they definitely will have the best resume. There's not many teams that play 3 Power 4 teams, they can do that. They can also beat a Boise State team who is kind of penciled in as that team to represent the group of 5 in this playoff. And I know they still have that taste in their mouth of losing 22 points to them last year on their home field in Allegiant Stadium. They're playing them again at Allegiant Stadium this year. It's a game on Friday in Week 9. I couldn't think of anything more electric than an undefeated UNLV team hosting Boise State in that matchup with 1 loss to Oregon, and that kind of setting the stage for what could be with the team that makes it to the CFB.
Dude, this guy's a sicko, okay? You're talking about the UNLV transfer quarterback from Holy Cross, because a lot of people probably sold their UNLV stock, whatever they had of it, when Jaden Mayava transferred to USC. You're talking about a Week 9 G5 game. I love it, Kato. I absolutely love it. You mentioned Boise State, man. Couple of one-loss teams hanging around here that could end up in the G5 conversation. You got Boise State and Texas State. Boise State, now their loss obviously looks a little bit better because it was to Oregon, and we'll see how Oregon goes throughout the rest of the season. But still, that logo, it's a nice shiny one to be able to say, hey, we only lost 3 points to them. It is what it is. And then Arizona State for Texas State. I thought Texas State was going to beat them, man. I was watching that game. I think it was a Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. What do we think about the one-loss teams now hanging around? Are those the only 2? What do you think of those 2? Is there another one-loss team I'm not mentioning here? Thoughts on some G5 one-loss contenders in this thing?
Yeah, I think when you look at the losses some of these teams have taken, it's going to very much be dependent on how their opponents kind of shake out and those losses age throughout the entire season. So obviously, Boise State and Texas State are in the same position here. If Arizona State can maybe go in and make some noise in the Big 12 this season, that'll make Texas State's loss look a little bit better. Same for Boise State and Oregon. If Oregon gets kind of back into that top 5 conversation as one of the best teams in the country entering the season, that'll look better for Oregon as well. So both of these teams kind of have the best odds, I think, when you look at it right now, and they also have kind of the same game plan. You want your opponents that you lost to play good, and you want to play good yourself. And if you're in this position, you want to be absolutely dominant in the rest of your games because you're now behind the 8 ball to some of these undefeated teams we've already mentioned. So if you're a Boise State, you still have Ashton Jeanty. This dude's an absolute monster. He has like 450 yards on the season, 9 touchdowns. He's only played in 2 weeks. And then my worry about Boise State is still the same. Maddox Matson is the quarterback there. I was worried about the quarterback position, and he kind of had a normal pedestrian performance in that game against Oregon, 150 yards, completed like 40% of his passes, 1 touchdown, didn't turn the ball over. But maybe elite quarterback play wins that game, and maybe elite quarterback play will help you get these dominant wins throughout the rest of the season that can help you hopefully redeem yourself for that loss. So I think for them, they have to kind of hope that they can keep blowing out some teams moving forward in the future, and hopefully Ashton Jeanty himself can kind of generate some Heisman buzz for himself and get this team some national attention. Then for Texas State, same thing. I think they're a team who's going to be rooting for Arizona State. They're in a kind of worse position, I think, because I talked earlier in our last conversation about how the Sun Belt isn't necessarily the strongest league and their side of the conference in the West, so they're not going to really have any resume builders moving forward, so they're going to have to really start blowing teams out. Hope Arizona State does well. And my biggest worry with them too is they kind of had some close, just crucial mistakes and turnovers in that game against Arizona State that kind of got the best of them in some of their losses. They lost 4 games last year. G.J. Kinney's doing a great job as far as turning that program around, but they have to kind of show that killer instinct as well and kind of show that they can perform in the fourth quarter and close out games a little bit better than they did last year and a little bit better than they did against Arizona State.
And the Boise State lost to Oregon too, like 2 touchdowns on special teams. You lose the game by 3, you're like, I'm not saying that Oregon wouldn't have eventually scored on those drives anyway. Like maybe it's a moot point, but like to at least give yourself a chance, you know, to be in that conversation. The thing I'm curious about to get your thoughts on here with Boise State, Cato, is like I feel like Boise State. It's wrong to say this, but like the college football public is familiar with that logo. They're familiar with that brand, and now the college football public's not making the decisions here. But how much does that help, like, the whole narrative game that you're playing if you're the G5 and you're Boise State? Like, we've seen them play in BCS bowl games. We remember Kellen Moore. I know that's kind of, you know, some deeper cuts for some of our college audience that's watching right now. But, I mean, does that help Boise State, the fact that we've seen them on big stages before, like you mentioned, Gene T and the Heisman buzz and all that?
It definitely matters, JD, and it definitely is going to help Boise State in this situation. They're probably in the best position out of any one-loss team in the country to make the playoffs, and that's some of these teams that are even in Power 5 leagues or Power 4 leagues, rather, just because you look at the narratives that matter. We talk about Florida State last year. You talk about this wanting to be a matchup where you have a strong showing, and Boise State just has a lot of familiarity with the country as far as what they're able to do, and not to mention they were kind of penciled in, like I said before, as the team to be put in this spot. If they did run the table, they did handle business, and even if they did have a close loss to Oregon. So you mentioned it. If NIU goes the rest of the season, say they get a win against NC State, maybe they lose against NC State, and they win out the rest of their conference, maybe a MAC team emerges, an AAC team emerges, and they have a lot of narrow wins in their conference versus a Boise State team who maybe makes easy work of everyone on their schedule. I think that's where the eye test kind of matters, and it's going to be about narratives. It's going to be about how bad did your loss look versus how good your loss looked, how well are you handling your competition within your conference. So I think Boise State definitely has the advantage of kind of history on their side and just the narrative on them coming into this season as well. I think if they can hold on to that, have some dominant performances going forward, maybe if Ashton Jeanty gets himself an invite to New York in December, I think they're going to be well positioned to be in that conversation still.
Whoa, can you imagine Ashton Jeanty? Just to be in the room for that, for the Heisman Trophy, that would that in itself would be a win for the G5. Kato, we asked you this last time. My answer has changed throughout these first call it 4.5 weeks with week 0 factored in there. Boise State was the horse you were rolling with, pun intended, last time we talked. Are we still rolling with Boise State to be the G5 pick? Are we thinking it could be, Go University? Where are we at right now? Temp check here. Not holding you to it. We'll ask you every time. What's the temp check for you right now as your G5 pick to be that 12 seed?
I think the safe pick has to be NIU just because they're simply leading the pole position right now. They're the only team that's ranked in the G5 right now. And if they can take care of business against NC State and really keep their ranking and stay up in their rankings and take care of the rest of their schedule, I think it's theirs to lose right now and theirs to hold on to. The biggest question is, can they get it through the MAC conference, like I said? But I think when you look at a Boise State, they do have that potential to maybe rattle off a bunch of wins, do what they have to do, and put themselves firmly back in that conversation. But I think it's going to be hard for Boise State to get ranked. And I think if UNLV even takes care of business this weekend, they might find themselves in the rankings. If they get a win over Syracuse, they'll definitely find themselves in the rankings. So NIU's probably my first pick just because they're in the top of pole position. But I mentioned that schedule for this go-go offense in UNLV, man. If they can take care of business and go into that Boise State game undefeated in week 9, they will be ranked and they will be in the driver's seat, I think, as far as making it to the 12-team playoff. So kind of split the baby on that answer, but give me NIU followed by UNLV right behind them as far as my 2 front runners right now to make that 12-team playoff.
You're not watching G5 ball like my guy. I promise you, you're not. You think you are? You're not about this life like Kaiden Smith is about this life. College Football Playoff Selection Committee, just a contract basis. I mean, don't take him away from On 3, but I'm just telling you, we got a weapon sitting right here in the office if you want to utilize him. More power to you. Kato, best in the business, man. Appreciate you dropping by the hard count, man.
Great as always, JD. Appreciate you.
Now, man, Kaiden Smith, App State legend. App State legend. I'm telling you what, man, Boone, North Carolina, you just walk around, it's going to be the Kaiden Smith Hall of Fame essentially here pretty soon. Got the board right behind us too. We got some weekly picks going on in the office. Kato with a strong showing now. He's gonna be battling here to be not just on the podium. He might be in the top of that whole thing when it's all said and done. We got a good list there too, from Josh Newberg to our entire production team with Nick Brake, Trey Andy. I'm looking up at the board. If I'm not looking at the camera right now for those of y'all watching live on YouTube, because we have the board literally right behind the camera. So it'll be fun, man. It'll be a fun season. I'm telling you, G5 now, got to account for it. Have to account for it now as we move into this beautiful thing that is the new college football era, college football playoff era, I suppose, the 12 teams. So with that being said, we've reached that point in the week now. Hay is just about in the barn. We got one more bale to put in there, and that is our final thoughts. Last time now we get to talk in a live capacity for a full-length show and tell you what we think about week 4 for the college football season. We're going to just kind of call our shot a little bit here. Typically, I'll give you just like a fleeting thought or something to think about or whatever it is, but we're going to kind of call our shot here a little bit. I think we leave this weekend saying USC is the second best team in the Big Ten. I think they go out to the Big House. I think they have a tremendous showing defensively, and I think that offense is humming. I think we're okay, hey, Lincoln Riley and co., they could be in the college football playoff. And I think we're all sort of holding our breath a little bit right now because of, the LSU game was close, and LSU didn't look amazing in South Carolina, and they were on a bye last week, and they only beat Utah State the week before. And so it's I understand all that, and there's going to be a lot of, I think, detractors if they do take care of business against Michigan and say, well, hey, it's not last year's team. I understand that. But put this last year's USC team out there against this current Michigan team, they would get ragdolled. They would get body bagged by this Michigan team if they had last year's unit out there defensively. If they go out and beat Michigan and have a strong showing defensively, I'm not worried about the who's playing quarterback thing for Michigan. In fact, them having Alex Orji at Michigan, I think even doubles down on the idea that if you're able to match up in the trenches and play good football on the defensive line of that front seven, That should validate a lot of what we believe about USC. I'm not telling you they win the whole darn thing. I'm not telling you USC is a finished product defensively. But if they go out there and do what I think they're going to do to Michigan, put some respect on USC's name. Put them at that 2 spot in the Big Ten. I know Oregon's going to be there. I know that Penn State's still trending a good direction. But like USC, 2 pretty validating filters between LSU and Michigan. Go ahead and put them in that 2 spot. I think this week now also verifies everything we've sort of already believed about Nico Iamaleava. And it's one thing to do it against NC State and Chattanooga and Kent State and all that. That's all well and good. But, like, I think now when he goes out and balls out against Oklahoma, there's not going to be any more, yeah, but it was neutral site. Yeah, but it was a G5. Yeah, but it was NC State. No. Go to Oklahoma, and if you take care of business against that defense, say what you want about the offense for Oklahoma. They're going to figure it out. They're still putting those pieces together. That defense is salty. Salty outfit. 79% production back from a year ago. They're going to bring the juice when it comes to applying pressure. They're going to be very complex in their scheme. I promise you, Norman, Oklahoma will be on fire for Josh Heupel's return. Like, this is the game now where I don't want to hear any yeah buts around Nico. When he does his thing, make sure that we come back to this discussion and verify everything that we believe he is. It's early on, but we're going to have a lot to talk about with him and where he stands in that Heisman conversation. Not big on Heisman combos in week 4, but I'm just saying that would put him in a different tier in terms of how we perceive him. Here's just a simple one for you. I think Auburn beats Arkansas. Thought about doing a game prediction for this one. Taylon Green, the quarterback for Arkansas, if I'm an Auburn fan, makes me nervous. I feel a lot better about this game if I'm an Auburn fan that it's at Jordan-Hare. But, like, Hank Brown, new quarterback for Auburn, I was on the train of give Peyton Thorne more time. Hugh Freeze essentially said we're too good to not have a guy at quarterback that can deliver the football to our playmakers, is essentially what I believe he is saying by rolling with Hank Brown here. Hank Brown now, you check his socks. They are soaking wet, soggy feet against New Mexico. You love to see it. I think he goes out and has a day against Arkansas. Arkansas defensively, that secondary, a little bit suspect. Not 100% sure about them right now. They allowed 3 touchdowns through the air against UAB. Kind of played with their food against UAB as well. Alan Bowman from Oklahoma State threw for over 300. There's some yards to be had there. So the Prize Picks number for Hank Brown, his passing yard total is at 227.5 yards. I'll take the more there for what I just said. I don't trust that secondary from Arkansas. The playmakers at Auburn, I think, are powder kegs that are just waiting to really find their stride. So I think he has a day. I think he hits the more on that total. We'll go ahead and pair it with the Caleb Williams free square. Using code HARDCOUNT now, $5 in promo funds, or $5 in lineups, gets you $50 in promo funds just for playing. So I'll say this, we're hot on Prize Picks right now, and that's the play that we like a lot this week. I've said this for the better part of the last, I suppose it's been the entire week, but like this is the part of the year now where maybe we don't know who all the big dogs are. Maybe it's not a thing where we know who's winning the national championship. But this is the week now where some fakes get exposed, okay? This is the week. If you don't know who you are through 16 quarters of football, you may not like the answer you arrive at. At 16 quarters, you start to take identity. You start to solidify culture. Leadership steps up. You provide tendencies. Like this is kind of the part of the year where you start to find your footing. And if you don't have your footing through 16 quarters, hate to break it to you, the next 16 quarters are not going to be that enjoyable. So that is what it is. There's some exceptions to every rule, but that's kind of how I feel about that one. All right, a couple of ad reads for you here. Then I got one more final thought before we get out of here. If you've been paying attention to the YouTube show that you're watching right now, our folks at Huel taking care of us. I've started drinking it this time, or this week rather. Absolutely loved it. Running late, no time for breakfast, and you're starving. We've all been there, racing the meetings, practice, school pickups, whatever it is. But what if a delicious, nutritious meal could be ready in seconds? This podcast, The Hard Count, is sponsored by Huel, the world's #1 complete nutrition brand with over 400 million meals sold worldwide. Yes, you heard that right, 400 million. Huel is trusted by millions of people looking to fuel their days with convenient, complete nutrition. Try it for yourself with my exclusive offer, 15% off with code HARDCOUNT at Huel.com. Fuel your best with Huel today. So again, like I said, Huel, really enjoyed it this week. It is great. I'm going to have one actually after we finish up with the show. It's great post-workout. 400 calories, 35 grams of protein. Like it's definitely filling, but not to the point where you're like, oh man, now I feel sluggish. A great answer for you, like I just mentioned in the ad read, to make sure that you're able to stay fueled throughout your day. Really like this flavor too. We got the black edition here, kind of a chocolatey flavor, if you will. Just telling you now, good stuff in there, good ingredients. Huel, bringing you the hard count, 15% off with code HARDCOUNT at Huel.com. Unlock a healthier, easier way to eat with Huel, nutritionally complete meals in minutes so you can focus on what really matters. Again, one more take for you here, so hang tight. We got a couple more ad reads to get through here. We've told y'all all week. I want to tell y'all one more time. The Money Game is out now on Prime Video. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I would say we've talked about this for the better part of the last few weeks. So hey, let's get locked in here. Essentially, the Money Game is chronicling the life of several high-profile LSU athletes, from a Livy Dunn to a Jaden Daniels to an Angel Reese, all when NIL becomes a reality in college athletics. Okay, so college athletics, the NCAA says, hey, NIL, you're good. You can start making money from your name, image, and likeness with endorsements while still being able to play your sport. Wasn't allowed before. It's allowed now. So this kind of follows those athletes and their journeys. From executive producer and LSU alum Shaquille O'Neal, The Money Game is out now on Prime Video. So go and binge that 6-part docuseries. A lot of good stuff there. One more thing I want to let y'all know. The Hard Count is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Game Time, the best way to buy tickets, best way to make sure you have the best prices whenever you're buying your tickets, guaranteed. For me personally, whenever I'm looking for a ticket for a game, or if we're going to, not a college football game for us because we're fortunate enough to have credentials, but if you are buying a ticket to a college football game, know before you buy. See the view from the seat before you actually purchase the ticket. On the Game Time app, you can do that. So make sure you get that done with Game Time. Again, best tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. If you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what you paid for it, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So here's what we're going to do. Download the Game Time app, redeem code HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time, best tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I got one more final thought for you here before we get out of here. And the way that my favorite college football team operates, their season doesn't start until this weekend. For those of y'all that are tuning into the show, that is, of course, the Cornell Big Red. And we got a massive one this week. Going to, it's still upstate New York, Hamilton, New York. You jump on the bus, you take, I don't know, call it a 2-ish hour ride over there. Y'all, we got Cornell -4.5. I don't use the word lock very often. This is a lock of the century. All right, you got Jamison Wang, quarterback for the Big Red, out there wheeling and dealing, slicing and dicing, having himself a day. If you got him in fantasy, play him. If you find him on Prize Picks, take all the mores. The first game now of the Dan Swanstrom era. Where people ask us a lot on this show, hey, JD, that's cool you talk about college football, but you got to have a favorite team, right? Oh, we have a favorite team. Do we have a favorite team? We got the Cornell Big Red, baby. The future 2024, 2025, 2026 Ivy League champs, yeah. That's our favorite team. So, for all of us here, for Nick Brake on the ones and twos, for myself, JD Piquel, we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Let's go Big Reds. Have ourselves a tremendous week for the college football season. Again, take the Big Red to cover -4.5. We're going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. All right, let's go. Let's go. Cornell victorious all Saturday.